Judge Prescott believed he could quiet Pam Bondi with a penalty. He was taken aback when she methodically deconstructed his entire argument in front of the audience. The courthouse in Tampa, Florida had witnessed numerous legal confrontations. Yet, on this specific morning, no one could have foreseen the tempest that was about to erupt. Pam Bondi, as astute as always, entered through the imposing wooden doors, briefcase in one hand, the other deftly adjusting the lapel of her blazer. She arrived for what was expected to be a straightforward hearing, one she could easily navigate even in her dreams. As she approached the defendant's table, she sensed the weight of the judge's gaze upon her, even before his voice filled the courtroom. Judge Alan Prescott, a figure recognized for his straightforward attitude, was not looking at her face but rather at something resting just below her collarbone, a modest gold cross. A palpable tension enveloped the courtroom, creating an atmosphere of hushed anticipation. Then, with a precision that cut through the air, Prescott cleared his throat and leaned forward. "Ms. Bondi, I must emphasize that religious symbols are not appropriate in my courtroom." Pam hardly fluttered her eyelashes. "Your Honor, the cross you are wearing compromises the impartiality of this environment. It must be removed or you risk incurring a fine." A soft whisper spread among the sparse audience present. The bailiff adjusted his stance, a hint of discomfort evident in his demeanor. The clerk shot a quick look at the judge before turning back to Pam. This was not the initial instance of a judge attempting to impose authority in an unconventional manner, yet it marked the first occasion where a lawyer faced a fine due to a necklace. Pam remained still. "I apologize, Your Honor, but my cross holds the same significance as a wedding ring or a locket containing a cherished family photo." Judge Prescott's expression was inscrutable. "I have a different perspective on that." He let out a weary sigh as though the conversation was already wearing him down. "Remove it immediately or I will be compelled to impose a fine for violating the principles of courtroom neutrality." In an unprecedented turn of events, Pam Bondi faced a fine for the first time in her career, not due to any misconduct or procedural misstep, but rather for the choice of a piece of jewelry she wore. The penalty wasn't the concern. It embodied its significance. She kept the cross on. Instead, she clasped her hands over her briefcase, her demeanor composed. She was determined to hold on to this. "Your Honor, prior to proceeding, I wish to formally address this matter." Judge Prescott arched an eyebrow. "Handle it?" "Indeed, I will be submitting an objection and wish to articulate my argument formally." The judge wore a sly grin, casting a quick look at the clock hanging on the wall. "Ms. Bondi, I trust you recognize that this hearing pertains to a business dispute rather than your personal concerns." Pam remained unperturbed. "I'm also conscious that the First Amendment remains steadfast regardless of individual perspectives." That certainly captured his interest. He reclined in his chair, his gaze sharpening just a touch. The court reporter's fingers lingered above her keyboard. The atmosphere in the room was tense, not due to a dispute over a contract, but because an experienced lawyer had just confronted a judge's authority directly. Pam understood she was treading a delicate path, yet retreating was not on the table. "You are penalizing me for wearing a cross. Let's analyze that from a legal perspective, shall we?" The judge let out a deep breath, massaging his temples. Before he had a chance to reply, Pam was already delving into her briefcase. She was not merely going to engage in a debate. She was on the verge of unraveling his entire argument. But Judge Prescott was unaware of the profound pit he had begun to excavate for himself. Pam extracted a solitary sheet of paper from her briefcase, laying it with precision on the table before her. She took her time. Each action was intentional. Each moment of quiet deepened the palpable tension that hung in the air. Judge Prescott let out a weary sigh. "Ms. Bondi, I lack the luxury for dramatics." Pam remained utterly still. "I feel the same way, Your Honor. However, what I possess is a solid grasp of constitutional law." The judge leaned in, his fingers intertwined, preparing himself for the unfolding events ahead. "You are penalizing me for wearing a cross, asserting that it disrupts the neutrality of the courtroom. But may I inquire, Your Honor, what legal precedent supports that assertion?" The atmosphere was still. The court reporter's fingers poised delicately above the keys. The bailiff hardly moved an inch in his chair. Judge Prescott exhaled slowly. "This courtroom functions under my jurisdiction, Ms. Bondi." Pam gave a slight nod. "Indeed it does. However, that authority does not supersede the Constitution." She wrapped her fingers against the paper laid out before her. "Personal religious expression enjoys protection under the First Amendment, particularly when it remains non-disruptive to proceedings." The judge sneered. "You practice law rather than teach it." Pam smiled, yet the gesture lacked any genuine warmth. "Let's delve into case law, shall we?" She grasped the sheet of paper. Tinker vs. Des Moines, 1969. A pivotal case that affirmed individuals retain their constitutional rights upon entering a government institution, be it a school or a courtroom. Judge Prescott's jaw clenched ever so slightly. He was familiar with that case. All those in the legal profession certainly did. Pam continued on her path unwavering. West Virginia State Board of Education vs. Barnett, 1943. The Supreme Court determined that forcing individuals to conceal or eliminate symbols of their personal beliefs infringes upon their First Amendment rights. She placed the paper gently on the surface. Now, Your Honor, would you like me to continue, or would you rather reflect on that fine? The judge's fingers drummed lightly on the armrest of his chair. He found himself trapped, fully aware of his predicament. Yet, his pride held him back from yielding, at least for the moment. This is not a matter of faith, Ms. Bondi. Pam inclined her head slightly. So, what led you to create it that way? A handful of hushed gasps echoed through the courtroom. Judge Prescott's expression grew somber. That's sufficient. His voice cut through the air, yet the grip of his authority was waning. Pam leaned forward, her voice unwavering. With all due respect, Your Honor, I will cease my objections once I am provided with a legal basis for this fine, as I have yet to hear a valid argument. After a lengthy silence, the judge finally turned to the clerk. Designate the fine for pending review. Pam wore a sly grin. I'll consider that a momentary triumph. However, she still had more to accomplish. The true battle was only beginning. Judge Prescott's expression was inscrutable, yet the subtle movement in his chair spoke volumes. He had anticipated a simple agreement, not an all-out constitutional confrontation. The atmosphere in the courtroom had transformed from mere tension to a palpable electricity. Pam sensed it deeply. All eyes were fixed on her, observing, anticipating. She had marked her territory, and now the judge faced a pivotal decision. Stand firm in his flimsy reasoning and face potential embarrassment, or seek a path to retreat while maintaining authority. However, Prescott was not the type to retreat without a fight. Ms. Bondi, he started, his voice steady and deliberate. There are valid reasons behind the existence of courtroom rules. By permitting one type of personal expression, I inevitably invite all others in. Pam's lips sealed tightly. Are you referring to the wedding bands that many of the solicitors here are wearing? Or the lapel pins permitted for government officials? Prescott's jaw clenched. Pam persisted relentlessly. Or let's discuss the occasion when you permitted a defense attorney to don a pink ribbon for breast cancer awareness during a trial. There was no problem on your end with that. A soft ripple of whispers emerged among the onlookers. Prescott cast a fierce look in their direction, yet the harm had already been inflicted. Pam had just revealed his biased application of the rules. Pam reclined, folding her arms across her chest. So, Your Honor, could you explain why this rule is applicable solely to my cross? Prescott's fingers wrapped tightly around the edge of his desk. He found himself ensnared, and every person in that courtroom bore witness to his predicament. He had imposed an unspoken guideline rooted in his own prejudices, and now it was disintegrating around him. For the first time since the hearing commenced, he found himself without a reply. Pam had no reason to revel in her triumph. She allowed the silence to linger, giving everyone a moment to fully grasp the weight of the situation. Then she struck the decisive blow. If you uphold this decision, Your Honor, I will promptly file an appeal before the ink has a chance to dry on the ruling. When that moment arrives, I assure you this case will capture the spotlight. She allowed that to resonate within her. A judge imposing a fine on a woman for wearing a cross in court? I have no doubt the higher courts would be eager to consider that precedent. Prescott's nostrils expanded with intensity. His ego and pride were engaged in a fierce battle with the unyielding truths of reality. Pam maintained her gaze. She allowed him to linger with it. As time passed, his error became increasingly clear. At last, after what seemed like a never-ending stretch of time, he let out a sharp breath. The fine is rescinded, he muttered. Pam beamed. Thank you very much, Your Honor. However, this had evolved beyond merely a penalty. She had just delivered a message that resonated powerfully, one that Prescott would remember for a long time. What about the consequences? The journey had merely commenced. The judge's declaration that the fine is rescinded should have brought the matter to a close. Yet the courtroom had transformed into something beyond a mere legal battleground. It was a remarkable event, and all those in attendance had just experienced something they would surely remember for a long time. The court reporter's fingers danced across the keyboard, her focus unwavering, yet an unspoken awareness lingered in the air. This transcript was destined to reach far beyond these walls. The clerk, who had first appeared apprehensive when the fine was revealed, now cast a fleeting look at Pam, seemingly in awe. Judge Prescott adjusted himself in his seat, organizing his documents as though he could somehow wipe away the instant. Yet Pam was aware of the truth. This was not an issue he could easily dismiss. The stillness was overwhelming. Pam composedly straightened her blazer, the delicate gold cross remaining perfectly positioned just as it had been all along. She emerged victorious. Yet, she had to ensure that this achievement transcended mere personal triumph. It must signify something deeper. She faced her client, a middle-aged entrepreneur who was the true catalyst for this hearing. The man offered her a subtle nod of acknowledgement, his admiration for her deepening with each passing moment. Pam realized this had transcended her own concerns. As soon as the courthouse doors swung open, the response was swift. An observer who had been focused on a completely separate matter in the same location became aware of the recent developments. In just an hour, a local news site published the headline, "Florida Judge Tries to Impose a Fine on an Attorney for Wearing a Cross, but Things Don't Unfold as Expected." Pam's phone vibrated, then once more, and yet again. Peers, past classmates from law school, members of the press. Curiosity buzzed around her, but Pam had no desire for sensational stories or the twists of public narrative. She envisioned a grander scheme. What will she do next? Elevating this matter beyond a mere courtroom battle. She was far from naive. She understood that situations like this created waves regardless of her intentions. This had evolved beyond the confines of one judge and one attorney. This posed a challenge to a precedent that had yet to be established, but certainly had the potential to be. Would other judges consider doing something like this? Would lawyers feel compelled to leave their personal symbols at home to prevent any potential conflict? Could this moment inspire individuals to challenge the limits of courtroom impartiality in ways that reflect personal convictions? Pam was determined to prevent that from occurring. By that evening, the narrative had already begun to evolve beyond its original confines. A prominent legal analyst on a conservative news network raised the issue during a panel discussion. On social media, intense discussions erupted between those who backed the judge's position and those who viewed Pam's defiance as a crucial stand for constitutional rights. Pam sat in her office observing the conversation unfold on her phone. A representative from a major news organization had already contacted me, seeking to arrange an interview. She let out a slow breath, her fingers gently massaging her temple. She dedicated years to advocating for clients, firmly asserting her position in high-stakes cases. Yet, this seemed distinct and it transcended matters of corporate conflicts or legal defenses. This discussion centered on individual liberties and the potential for them to be revoked at the discretion of a solitary judge. However, Judge Prescott had more in store for her. She felt it even as she exited the courthouse that day, the intensity of his gaze before he struck the gavel and concluded the session. He may have withdrawn the penalty, yet there lingered a certain something in his gaze, an unvoiced provocation. Pam felt a sense of uncertainty about the shape it might assume, yet she was acutely aware that this struggle was far from concluded. Pam had anticipated some repercussions, perhaps a handful of emails and maybe a few phone calls from colleagues sharing their thoughts. What she hadn't anticipated was the astonishing pace at which everything intensified. As she entered her office the following morning, her assistant, Lauren, was already there, wearing a look of concern. "You have to check this out," she said, raising her tablet high. Pam accepted it, her eyes darting across the screen. The Florida Bar Association recently released a statement meticulously crafted, balanced in tone, yet clear in its underlying messages. Judges possess the authority to uphold decorum within their courtrooms. Although legal professionals have the freedom to express themselves, it is crucial to adhere to the guidelines established by the judges in charge. We have confidence in our judicial system to handle these issues with impartiality and honesty. Pam exhaled gently. This was more than a mere remark. This served as a cautionary note. The phrase, "honor the guidelines established by the overseeing judges," carried more weight than a mere generalization. It served as a cue. The legal community was closely connected. The Florida Bar seldom addressed courtroom conflicts unless there was cause for concern that matters were escalating beyond control. This indicated that Prescott harbored more than mere resentment. He was diligently orchestrating efforts to garner support from key institutions. She placed the tablet on the surface. "Did this just release today?" Lauren gave a slight nod. "Just a short while ago." Pam felt no surprise. The legal community was intimate. The news spread quickly, and it was evident that Prescott was treating this matter with utmost seriousness. Yet, just as she was about to continue, Lauren paused. "There's more," she stated with caution. Pam looked up, her face a mask of mystery. "Proceed." Lauren passed her another document, this one in print. Pam glanced over the opening lines. Her pulse remained steady, yet her thoughts raced wildly. Attorney Pamela Bondi acted in a way that interrupted courtroom proceedings, improperly challenged judicial authority, and displayed conduct unbefitting an officer of the court. Pam found herself unable to resist. She emitted a brief, mirthless chuckle. Unraveling? She gave a slight shake of her head. That's amusing, Lauren sighed. It's an act of vengeance, straightforward and unambiguous. Pam reclined in her chair, rhythmically drumming her fingers on the armrest. Prescott sought more than mere retribution. He aimed to be a role model. He had been defeated in his own courtroom, and now he was leveraging the system to reclaim his authority. Through the submission of this formal complaint, he aimed to change the story. He had ceased to be the arbiter who exceeded his bounds. He portrayed himself as the victim of disrespect. And Pam, he aimed to portray her as the audacious attorney who had taken him on merely for the thrill of it. Pam recognized this maneuver from past experiences. It was a familiar strategy. Transform the accuser into the one being accused, reshaping the narrative so that the core issue becomes obscured by layers of bureaucracy and intricate details. Yet she was determined not to allow that to occur. What are the steps involved in this? She inquired, seamlessly transitioning into a different mode. Lauren let out a breath. Please ensure your response is submitted within 10 days. Should the complaint proceed, a formal review may be initiated. Pam inclined her head with a measured gesture. And who is responsible for overseeing that review? Lauren paused, uncertainty flickering in her mind. A group comprising judges and experienced solicitors. Pam nearly smiled. If Prescott intended to overwhelm her with documents and subtle coercion, he had underestimated her resolve. This was not going to be dealt with in silence. This was on the verge of becoming widely known. Lauren observed her intently, anticipating her response. What would you like to pursue? Pam inhaled deeply, then extended her hand towards her phone. If Prescott is up for some games, then let's get started. As she navigated through her contacts, her thoughts raced far into the future. Prescott believed she would present her case in a private hearing, receive a subtle reprimand, and then continue with her life. Yet, he failed to grasp the true nature of his opponent. Pam had dedicated her professional life to the art of patience and strategy. And now she was poised to ensure that all eyes were on her. Pam was efficient with her time. She understood the mechanics behind it all. Revenge proved to be most impactful when executed quietly and discreetly. Prescott aimed to manage this discreetly, leveraging the system to her advantage while ensuring the public remained unaware. She was determined to prevent that from occurring. With a swift motion, she navigated her phone, located the necessary contact, and initiated the call. After 2 rings, a voice I recognized came through the queue. Pam, I was just on the verge of giving you a call. It was Lisa Reynolds, an experienced storyteller from a prominent legal affairs program. She had reported on some of Pam's most significant cases in the past. Moreover, she boldly pursued accountability for judicial overreach. Pam was direct and to the point. Lisa, please pay close attention. A formal complaint has been lodged against me by a judge for causing a disruption during courtroom proceedings. But what truly transpired? He attempted to penalize me for donning a cross. And when I held my position, he retreated. However, he is now leveraging the system to inflict punishment upon me instead. Lisa paused, lost in thought. Then she exhaled sharply. Are you seriously saying that a sitting judge is attempting to penalize you for exposing his misuse of authority? Pam beamed. That's precisely what I'm conveying to you. Lisa acted without a moment's pause. I am in charge of this. Pam inclined her body slightly forward. I must document this before they attempt to twist the narrative. Once it becomes public, Prescott won't have the opportunity to spin this into a discrete disciplinary matter. Lisa was already handling it. I'll have a section ready by tomorrow. I'll ensure that legal analysts provide their insights, particularly those who aren't hesitant to identify this for what it truly is. Pam hung up, sensing the initial waves of change beginning to flow in her direction. However, she still had more to accomplish. She glanced over her shoulder at Lauren. Prepare a formal announcement. I aim to clarify my stance before Prescott and his associates attempt to complicate the situation. Lauren gave a subtle nod. Are you suggesting that this should be viewed as an instance of judicial overreach? Pam shook her head in disbelief. I aim to present it for what it truly is, an assault on individual rights and a misuse of judicial authority. If this judge believes he can penalize me for asserting my rights, just think about what he might have done to those without a voice. Lauren's expression grew steely. I will complete it. Pam took a deep breath, collecting her thoughts. Prescott had been relying on quietude. Yet, the nation was on the brink of discovering the full extent of his actions. Pam's wait was brief. As she settled in with her coffee the following morning, her phone began to buzz incessantly. News outlets had seized upon Lisa Reynolds' segment overnight, and social media was buzzing with activity. The headline permeated every corner. A Florida judge seeks to penalize an attorney for donning a cross. Now he's facing scrutiny. It wasn't solely conservative outlets covering the story. Legal experts from all perspectives were offering their insights. A constitutional lawyer from Georgetown appeared on live television to dismantle Prescott's reasoning, labeling it a clear overreach lacking any legal foundation. A prominent lawyer shared a detailed thread analyzing how Pam's actions had revealed a troubling precedent that required attention. At last, the moment arrived when Pam heard the words she had long anticipated. The Florida Judicial Review Board has declared that, in light of the media scrutiny, they will be examining Judge Prescott's behavior to assess if his ruling breached judicial ethics. Pam reclined in her chair, letting out a deep breath. This had transcended beyond her alone. This concerned every lawyer, every accused individual, and every person who had ever entered a courtroom, pondering if their rights could be taken away with a mere stroke of a judge's pen. Lauren entered, her phone raised high. "You won't want to miss this." Pam grasped it firmly and hit play. It was Prescott. He stood outside the courthouse, surrounded by flashing cameras, his demeanor rigid. The statement was brief, perhaps overly so for an individual attempting to justify their actions. "I have consistently maintained the honor of this courtroom. The measures implemented were aimed at preserving impartiality. Nonetheless, I hold the judicial review process in high regard and will engage with it completely." Pam nearly chuckled. Impartiality? He was still attempting to use that tactic? Lauren folded her arms across her chest. He's attempting to maintain his dignity. Pam nodded, yet faltered. This was not going to disappear. The Judicial Review Board faced an important decision. If they decided against Prescott, it wouldn't merely be a matter of professional shame. This would establish a standard, safeguarding individuals like Pam from enduring such retaliation in the future. Yet, even in the absence of an official reprimand, he had already forfeited what truly counted. His standing, his trustworthiness, his influence. After this, every attorney entering his courtroom would recognize him as the judge who attempted to silence someone and ultimately failed. Pam savored her coffee, taking her time before glancing up at Lauren. "Victory is ours." Lauren wore a sly grin. "Indeed, I'm aware." Pam placed her cup on the table. She had fought not only for her own sake. A message had been sent by her. Always stand your ground against those in authority who seek to take away your rights. Sometimes it only requires a single individual to hold firm and transform the entire situation. Stand firm in your convictions and ensure that your voice resonates. Engage with us by liking, commenting, and subscribing for more impactful narratives that resonate.